Let us begin in our customary way of just remembering those who lost their lives in that dreadful tragedy. And our governance officer will confirm once the 72 seconds is over. And can I ask you before we start, I know I always say this, but if you've got a computer or a mobile phone, could you please check that it's not going to be in the middle of our time that we're remembering those who lost their lives. Thanks. Just check the things. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? Anyone received? No, not today. And are there any declarations of interest? Okay. The minutes of previous meeting, are you happy that I sign them as a true and accurate record? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Our first item is financial support for families following the Grenfell tragedy. And actually, I think it's quite an accurate report to have today because today was a day that we did our concluding statement at the Grenfell inquiry. And throughout the inquiry, we've always said that wherever we've made mistakes, we will front up to them. And not only will we just front up to them and apologise, we will do something about it. And in this case, it's before us, this paper is giving us the opportunity to right the wrongs which well, it's not wrongs, but that we didn't get, the things that we didn't get right. So I'm not being very, what do you say? I'm not explaining it very well, but not really that colour yet. So can we have a look at that? So it's paper 4, which is financial support for families following Grenfell tragedy. Okay. Richard, would you say a few words? Otherwise, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think your introduction is exactly right. This is an opportunity to, in Module 4, when we made our particular admissions regarding the failings in our immediate response, the team have been looking at the financial situation and trying to assess where there are opportunities for us to really enact on the deliverance of those failings and make sure that we make them right, as you say.
Yeah.
And I think here there's two main reasons and rationales for what's being suggested. One relates to transition payments, which is about trying to ensure that everybody who moved into a permanent secure property has that support and that transitional arrangement, no matter when they first made their original move. And the second being around, I guess, more of some reflections around some of the feel of some of our original policies and how they may or may not have worked for some of our bereaved households, particularly survivor bereaved households, to whom they weren't aware of difficult situations in the individual.
Yeah. So the decisions that they made, what they were going to do, wasn't informed by other things. So that was just completely unfair. Yeah. Okay. And can I say, I forgot to mention that you've all got exempt agenda, but I'm not intending, it's pretty straightforward, so I'm not intending to go into private session unless any of you think that there's a question that you need to ask. Is that okay? Okay, fine. So does anyone have any questions? Josh? And then Sarah.
Thank you guys. Leader, and thank you, Callum, for coming. Just a question on the number. So in 2.1, the recommendation to award in 41 we then talk about payment to individuals in the transition payment, but then the other 9 people seem to somewhat disappear. I'm conscious that in 4.14 we talk about people who are getting direct voluntary pay, but there's more than 9 there. But wondering what happens between the 9 people, basically in 32 versus 41.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The 32 are the people who have missed out on proportions of transition payments, as you say. The other, forgive me if the section 4.14 isn't clear, the 9 individuals that was referenced about halfway through the paragraph is made up of 4 and the 5. So the 9 is the cumulative total, of which 4 people did receive partial direct voluntary payments and 5 didn't receive any.
Right. That's the 41.
Yeah, that's the
41. Okay, thank you. Have that for clarification. Thank you.
So, thank you for bringing this paper. I think it's really important that this is now addressed. But I just wanted to, how quickly can you implement the payments to these residents?
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a really important question. Some of the 41 individuals have been pressing us to right these wrongs for some time, and they are very aware of the fact that we were having these conversations internally with the council, and I think lines of communication are clear and ready for us to sort of move quickly. I think for some, this will come as hopefully positive news in terms of righting a wrong perhaps they've accepted, sadly, and I think there we will be reaching out through the right mechanisms, through the best contacts we have with them, to bring them to the table and make sure that we can have that conversation at a time that works for them. I would have very much hoped that we would have completed all the payments by the end of the year.
Thank you. So,
Yep, thank you very much, Callum. As you say, it's fair. So thank you. And also I think it just shows that it's never too late to put things right. So thank you for doing this, thank you for pursuing this. Just a question, do you think there'll be any other funds that bereaved survivors may have missed out on, that are you pretty sure that this might be the final one?
I think from the work that we've done in terms of the payments the council made, we have been pretty meticulous. So every Tower or Grenfell War survivor has been issued a financial statement, and everything that we said we would provide them with has been gone through, and that's not really addressed by this paper. So there's been a massive exercise between ourselves and our finance colleagues to make sure that what we said people would receive, they received. This is an exercise then almost reflecting on the fairness of some of the policies that we had at the time. There are 1 or 2 cases of individual bereavement survivors where I know that they are asking us for help in trying to access some support that was provided by other funders who also missed out. But that isn't going to be a financial burden that comes to the council. So we are working with them to try and help right their wrongs. I think this is a helpful start for hopefully other agencies to reflect.
thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, can we please agree recommendation in paragraph 3?
Agree.
Thank you. Let's go to the next paper, which is annual
Thanks.
And again, I think this is
Very accurate is coming
today,
because there's been no
not bereavement survivors, one of the main complaints was that we didn't listen to
useless complaints.
previously, so it's
It's really, really important, I think, for any organisation to look at.
complaints in the record of them.
So much.
Is there anything you want to draw attention to, or should I just go straight to the question?
Yeah, just go straight to questions, I think. I mean, it's, as you say, it's a response to making improvement in this area and trying to make good use of the complaints that we get and improve the organisation accordingly.
So actually, I have a question. I mean, Kim, complaints in housing and repairs and things seem to have sort of gone up hugely.
Yes.
So kind of, if the service is improving, why are the complaints improve things so substantially.
Okay, well, I mean, this is going to sound a little bit odd when I say that. I really welcome the fact that we have a complaints report and a complaints process. And it's fair to say that there's been an awful lot of work that's been put in place in order to deal with accounts. I can draw, although the overall level of increases have gone up, one could say that there is, I think, the history of housing and housing management was such that people didn't complain because complaints weren't responded to, but they are very much being responded to now, and I draw comfort from the fact that although the volume has gone up, stage 1 complaints going into stage 2, the stage 2 complaints have actually gone down. And I think it's very important that we obviously learn from each of these mistakes that we have in order to provide a better service. So, I mean, as I say, the detail, I get a quarterly report. We have a review of the figures. I'm very keen, as is the whole of the department, on having KPIs, that people are very much focused on making sure that these come down to room runners. But, the bottom line is that they are still unacceptably high. There's a lot of work going on at the moment relating to repairs, which in itself bring a whole new wave of complaints. But I accept that the level that there is and the fact that there's more that we can do. I'm looking over towards Dan, who is here. I don't, Dan, if you've got any comments to make with regard to our complaints process.
On the housing management complaints, of course, this report is retrospectively covers the year 2022. So during that period, which obviously coincided with kind of some of the peaks of the pandemic, we know that not just in Kensington and Chelsea, but in other social landlords too around London, they saw a rise in complaints. But it's not completely out of keeping with the rest of the sector. And our data so far from the year that we're currently in suggests that it's gone down again since, which is again in keeping with the sector. I mean, not that that's the cause of complacency, but it's certainly a noticeable pattern, if that makes sense.
Emma.
So I thank you for this, and thank you. I also what I say every year, which is this is actually one of the most important documents that we have as councillors, because it allows us to actually to try and avoid complacency and actually think about what issues people may have. And it's not just the number of complaints, it's actually the type. And particularly if there are a lot of one type, that should be a red flag to us that there's probably a lot more complaints that we never ever receive, because we have lots of people in our community who wouldn't feel confident or able to write a complaint. And so, this is always the tip of the pyramid, particularly this lot. Having said all of that, it is, I think overall it is, we should be in a goodish place. And also it's really encouraging to see that the number of compliments have gone up so significantly. And so I wanted to end on that positive note, despite my earlier comment.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it takes a lot of time. Well, not some people, but on the whole, it takes quite a lot of time to have a complaint, go to the app and picking up the phone or writing an email, listing it all out. You don't do it unless you're really seriously fed up. So I think Emma's right, there'll be an awful lot of people who just roll their eyes but don't actually get to write an email. So we should treat this like that. Johnny, what's your...
Yes, well, this came to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee a few weeks ago, which I think is important because it does show how seriously we take complaints across the council. I was also going to flag that I think one of the themes that has emerged through the council plan consultation and the Grenfell consultations that have been ongoing is customer service being incredibly important.
Yeah.
And our complaint structure goes directly to the heart of that. It's all about the user experience that people have when they interact with the council. And I know that the members around the table will take it very seriously, and we look at the complaints in our areas. They're doing what we can to drag them down, and we've already touched on housing, which is a particularly difficult one. But I think there are challenges in every area, and we must be really laser focused on our desire to improve customer experience across the council, particularly given what we're hearing from our residents.
Yeah, and I'd like to actually draw your attention to 4.1, which are steps, review the complaint handling procedures, answer 90% of complaints within 10 working days, stage 1, 20 working days, stage 2. And actually, number 3, answer the complaint right, first time.
Yes.
So we don't have to go through, just get it right. And also for the centralised view of complaints, especially for you, so that you get you get the customer service is consistent. I think that's really important as well. Is there anything else on this?
I'm just going to add that adults do have a slightly different process, but we do aim to respond within 10 days. But sometimes the cases are so complex. Yeah, we need a bit of extra time, but we really do aim to respond within 10 days. Well,
Okay. Are there any other comments? Or any other questions? Yes, oh, Mary, I see you there.
I just wanted to pass on perhaps some of the comments from the
That would be very
OSC.
helpful.
And we had a long discussion about it, and we recognise the tension between number of complaints, sometimes meaning that we've got an accessible complaints procedure, and sometimes meaning that we've just got a lot of complaints. We established that this year, this report is the baseline, because we've had lots of years where A, we've got a new procedure, and B, we've had COVID. But we were anxious to establish, which Johnny and colleagues confirmed, that this will now be the baseline year against which we can properly compare years in future, which I think is really important. We welcomed the emphasis throughout this paper on learning from what happens. And I think our final comment was the sheer volume of housing concern complaints must be a concern, having heard all the housing management complaints, particularly having heard all the sensible things that people in housing said about it. We need to, but then next year we'll be able to see a comparison, and this year perhaps just isn't representative, but we were concerned about the shape.
As you said, it's really sort of this one's baseline and unestablished.
So, and just following on from what Mary said, thank you for that. There's something in 3.14 about the services and working together, because Mary talked about learning. And because in one department's working very well and working together seems a fair approach. And how can other departments learn from that? What's the kind of the sharing across all?
Well, I think all the information gets aired a lot within the organisation. It goes to all the departmental management teams. It goes to EMT. Obviously, it comes through the member process as well. And we do through those processes, I think, do learn from each other, because it was previously a very fragmented process before it was corporatised in this way. So I think putting the information this way together, it being presented throughout the organisation, we do treat the information now as very valuable and a source of improvement.
We were saying about really the next step is really important, to have a centralised view and consistency about how we look at the information, so that year on year we'll be able to look down and reflect back.
And being very clear that having more complaints isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it's probably just that we're recording complaints that are already there. So.
Anyone else? Please could we agree the recommendation for paragraph 2. Agree to begin. And what is that? Cost of living. So that goes to the
Yeah. So we know that the cost of living, the rising cost of living, is affecting residents across the borough, and so this is a very important paper in that it sets out some of the ways in which we're trying to help those people who have been affected. I think demonstrating how we care is really important in the context of our culture change around the council as well. It's not just what we do, but it's how we do it, and making sure that we're going above and beyond. There's investment and accessible advice for people that want to access it. There's a lot of funding in here, whether it's the £8 million cost of living fund, the £1.5 million that through the household support fund and some of our top-up as well was allocated last month, as well as all of the existing support that we have in the BCS, which I think is about £22 million in all. But I think what's really important is that we remember behind all of these numbers are real people who are finding things extremely difficult at the moment. And people across the leadership will have different experiences of that. We'll all have been through difficult times. I know I've grown up in temporary accommodation in a housing association flat in the borough as well. We've relied on free school meals in my household, so we know how transformative the kind of state support that we're seeing in a paper like this can be for families right here in Kensington and Chelsea, and that's why we're doing it. It's why in some cases, as we said, we're boosting the support that's available, going up from £3 to £4, for example, on the free school meals piece. And hopefully this won't be the end of that process of support. We know that through the winter there are going to be challenges for people, but this is where we are at the moment, from funding for young spaces as well, which I think we'll talk about. And hopefully we will, as we go into the spring, see increased support and people better able to cope with some of the very difficult circumstances they currently find themselves in.
I mean, could you give us some figures of, you know, what the evidence is and what's happening on the ground? Because I think that's really important that everything, because what Johnny's saying is how we're responding, but it would be good to know what we're responding to and what you expect to happen over the next few months.
Sure. So I think the most prevalent thing to talk through is the information we have from our low income family tracker, which takes an extract from housing data. And I think that there are many different ways of looking at it, but that's taken from our own data that we know are already in a vulnerable position, and that's shown a 10% increase over the just about 6 months of people that are below the poverty line. And in addition, we've seen 20% increase in the number of households who are struggling in terms of their financial resilience. So that's before we've come, we've got over the winter, and people are turning their heating on and other things. So we have access to that data. We're using that data constantly to look at where those impacts are, to map some of those impacts geographically. And we're also will be working very closely and are working very closely with our voluntary and community sector partners so that we can understand the kind of realities behind those figures. So we're going to have a State of the Borough event with our VCS partners in about 3 weeks' time, to understand from them the information they have, the impacts they're seeing on the ground, and to look at what further solutions we can put in place.
So it's an ongoing process. So this is a snapshot.
Yeah.
So, and then John.
Thank you, and thank you, Lisa, for that, for mentioning also about the State of the Borough meeting convening. And also on that, we work very closely with Kensington and Chelsea Social Council, and we've commissioned them to do some work on COVID, and asked them to pivot it actually to cost of living. And it's been really great working with them. And Johnny also mentioned the VCS and also our voluntary sector support fund, which is completely discretionary, which already helps the most vulnerable people in our borough. And that's a great example of the council working with the voluntary sector. So I think we are building on all these ties, and the tragedy is when a situation like cost of living comes up, that's where those ties actually become even stronger. But it's just good that we have all those connections already and that we're building on them.
Thank you. So Jen and then Josh.
Yeah, sort of a question and then one point. The question really is, as Johnny alluded to, the council obviously supporting preschool meals with additional funding. We appreciate what a good healthy meal for children can do. But in 4.3, and I'd love to believe the figure, but it says that there's been a 9% decrease in households in fuel poverty. But then in 4.11, it states that there's been a 10% increase in food bank usage.
Yeah.
So just to make sure we're not too reliant on our dashboard, are we making sure that our figures are real and realistic? And then just as a sort of a point is on the energy cap, and we do highlight that it is not a cap, but I think it is a misunderstood government guarantee that we need to really make sure we refrain from calling it a cap. If you use more energy, you will pay more. So perhaps we could change that language going forward as well.
Just on the first point, that's the reason why we are looking at both what we know from the data that we hold, plus what people are telling us on the ground, so that we can come to a kind of middle ground. The food bank usage is self-reported from those organisations and providers. This is taken from a way of looking at data and some definitions that are predefined. So somewhere in between those things is the answer, but that's important when you look at the range of data. And absolutely putting up on the energy cap. I'm fairly confident it is articulated in that way on our cost of living hub. and that it will be continue to be articulated that way in our comms and information for residents.
So it's going to carry on being articulated as it has.
No,
Carry on
as in
what
As
Joe
a-
was saying.
Joe
You can
said,
send-
how it's articulated underneath in the paragraph.
Okay, fine. Sorry, can I just say, the decrease in number of households and food property that's coming from the food banks, Salt and I certainly found in two property organisations that we've seen recently, people were saying that they're switching from doing food banks and handing out food for inviting people in to have hot meals. So maybe might be that, you know, you're not giving out X amounts of food, so it comes in our thing that you've got a decrease in food poverty, whereas actually that's not necessarily the case. They're just saying it's not only food poverty, it's food and fuel poverty, which is why they're coming in to eat that warm meal.
Yeah.
So that might be.
It's a range of things.
Yeah, exactly. Josh.
Well, just a few comments actually. I mean, first of all, I'd just like to welcome the government support. I know it's £15 billion, but especially for businesses, because even though residents, their neighbours and friends are affected by cost of living, businesses need to function. If those businesses can't function, that has then an impact on those people running those businesses and everything else. So I'd just like to obviously welcome the business charity, the business and jury scheme from the government, but also I'd just like to take a big shout out to the council's business rate hardship team, because I'm getting a significant amount of businesses coming to me saying they can't afford it, they can't afford the energy, they can't afford the staffing costs, they can't afford the overheads, and indeed can't afford the business rates. And of course, what we want to encourage is that those businesses to remain functioning so they can pay their staff, and so their staff can not necessarily fall behind in this time. So I'd just like to just say that the council's business rate hardship team working very well. Of course, it needs to be discussed on merit, but just like to flag that and not only individuals in suffering, but larger people as well. We're trying to support them as much as we can.
Yeah. Thank you. Catherine, this one.
It's been mentioned a few times, but I just wanted to again mention, you know, with so many anxieties for families and food and heating being the main ones, that it is great that they will have the reassurance that they're going to get free school meals till the end of the Easter holiday. So at least there's some certainty in that. And as we said before about increasing the food vouchers from £3 to £4, which for some people actually was a whole extra £20 a week during the holidays. Because if they were accessing some of the holiday activities and food things at our venture playgrounds, they were already getting a hot meal there and they were getting a voucher. So, you know, I'm really glad that we're helping children in the borough in this way.
Oh, sorry, Anna, I didn't see you.
Sorry, so from.
Well, I just wanted to kind of draw everyone's attention to Appendix 3 and Appendix 2 and seeing Mary, Chair of the Auditing Scrutiny Committee here. This aspect of this has come before.
Actually, no, it was the housing committees, screening committee.
And I know that this appendix
It's been done incredibly well at the committee, because it really does list all the different funds that are available. For someone trying to seek some of these funds, it can be incredibly confusing. So I do think that our cost of living hub is really essential for people to know what help is out there and how they can access it. So thank you for putting these together. I think it is incredible to see all this in one place, and everybody see it in one place. That's nice. So thank you.
I just slightly left a centre question, which people may not, nobody be able to answer in this room, but it talks about the Kenzie Foundation Winter Fuel Scheme, and the fact that Kenzie do a couple of really good things. I have to say, I'm just wondering how are we working with them to publicise that, because that, I mean, I was aware of it because I'm a councillor, but I suspect most people actually aren't aware of it, and given we have a greater reach than them.
we have actually done a big comms on it because we realised that was so important, but also we've done a comms also because our borough is so different, and there are many people who don't actually need the government.
Exactly.
And so we've linked Kensington Foundation on our website to people who want to search for more information and want to know how they can help enable actually themselves as well. So we've done it from the point of view of letting people who need that winter fuel benefit to know about it, but also people who want to help and contribute. So we've done a kind of quite a nice sample. Would you say anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Can I just pick up on that? But will Kensington Chelsea Foundation, do they have data that they can, so actually, I mean, I've donated to them in the past, but I've had nothing directly from them. This is more a question for you to pass on to them.
Exactly.
But actually, it would be quite sensible
Yeah.
if the KNC Foundation were actually sending things out to all their donors to say, do you recognise that you can pass this money on? Because I haven't received anything from them.
Oh, okay, I'll pass it on because they do have a very good campaign, so I'll definitely pass that on.
Okay. Anything else? I just draw your attention to 5.2, which is just telling us that, you know, that we've got the cost of living plan, it has been developed, but it's a live document, evidence-based, and it's going to be continually updated and adapted. And then you can see the main headline. And I'm saying that because actually, if you look at the recommendations, the first thing is to agree, to note the report so we know what's happening, but it's also to agree for those next steps, through the cost of living action plan and those next steps. So are there any other questions? And actually, before I move to the recommendations, I should just check with Mary that whether you have any comments on that. Okay, so can we move to the recommendations in paragraph 2 and agree them, please? Agreed. Thank you very much. Can we move now to the next paper, which is A7, which is the medium-term financial planning. And it's an update on that.
Yeah, so shall I? If the last paper was all about how we can demonstrate that we carry through the budget, is an opportunity to demonstrate our ongoing competence. In that context, I'm pleased that we're able to present a balanced budget at this stage in the cycle for the next year, although we recognise there are huge headwinds already and there are more to come. I should pay tribute to my predecessor as lead member for finance, seeing as she's in the room, and tribute to all of my colleagues for all of the work that you've done to get us to this position. I think linking back to the last paper, actually, I draw attention to one of the biggest budget items we have every year that probably goes under discussed. It's the £14 million or thereabouts that we fund council tax rebates with. And so, although we're doing an awful lot to help people with the cost of living crisis in the short term, there is ongoing support available that this council has been committed to over a long period of time. And hopefully what the document starts to present is how we're building a greener, safer and fairer borough, as we pledged to when we formed this administration. I think there are examples of that across the piece, whether it's a renewed focus on graffiti busting and tackling litter that Jem is looking at, the ongoing investment in things like wardens that Emma looks after, and also I think protecting, and I'm sure we'll say more, the voluntary sector budget, because we know that although the state has a role, the third sector is absolutely critical to our response to the challenges that exist. So I think it's, on the whole, a reasonably good position, but we must be alive to the economic challenges that we face. We know that inflation is a big problem. There are known unknowns and unknown unknowns that could imperil the stable position we're currently in, but we are alive to those. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
Well, you know your areas. Are there any questions or anything you'd like to bring up? Kim?
Yes, thank you for the report. Yes, there is a wind that's blowing at the moment, and it's one that we're feeling quite strongly as far as housing is concerned. And I'm pleased, we present. One of the issues, one of the items I'd just like to say is that within the growth bits on Appendix B, that I will be submitting a paper on the Spend to Save growth bin, which is an initiative that's already in place, which is effectively targeting fraud within our housing stock, where people are legally subletting. And it's with the scheme we'd like to extend another year to go out for 3 years. And at the moment, we've been running it really for a little over a year. And I'm pleased to report we have over 120 cases already that are now going to be investigated.
120?
Yeah. I mean, the opportunity for fraud within RBKC, because of the very high level of rent levels compared to council taxes, there's quite a margin there. So that's something which I will be presenting in paper for a supplemental group.
Anything else? Mike, I should ask you, You presented this for 20 minutes. Are you feeling comfortable with it? What are the things, other things that you want to highlight, other things you want to say, you know, watch this space on this one, be careful on here, or is it all fine?
It's not all fine, because there is an enormous amount.
What would you draw out for us?
I think really just that there is an enormous amount of uncertainty. I mean, there's been uncertainty for several years, but it's probably more now than ever before. Before the recent sort of occurrences and changes in leadership nationally, the Secretary of State, who was previously the Secretary of State, said we get a 2-year settlement, but I think that's pretty unlikely now. We're going to get another 1-year settlement, and we really don't know exactly what will be in that. We may get a better idea in a week when there's another mini budget financial statement, but all this is really subject to what happens in the settlement. I think we've taken a fairly robust position on that, and the assumptions we made are the best that we can make, and I think the council is set up for what happens over the next few months as well as it can be. So I think the figures are as robust as they can be, but there is a great deal of uncertainty even over the next 2 or 3 months. We're certainly in a stronger position being able to present a balanced position at this stage than most are. Most councils are not at a balanced position at the moment and have got the uncertainty on top of that. So I think I'm as pleased with the position as is possible given the overall difficulties which the national government obviously face and which inevitably must impact on that government.
And when do we know what the financial settlement will be? Is it something like the 21st of December or something?
It will probably be, about then, the last day of Parliament. Before Parliament
And
stands.
so, when will it sort of next come back to this meeting? Come back in January that we update, or is it February? What's the sort of next report tranche?
February, I think, will be the main one. If there is a big change in the settlement, then we may bring a report in January. And if the figures are massively changed, but mainly the process is to come back in February with a much more final version and then to take that through the annual.
Because by February, you'll have the supplement in December, had time in January to analyse everything, see where we've got to on those.
Yeah, and we have, we have reserves that we can use if we have to, if there is, if the settlement is much worse than expected. But
you couldn't use, those reserves which aren't capital.
But
reserves which are revenue reserve.
But the aim is to stay in balance and not have to do that. But we are waiting with bated breath. I mean, I think today it's been trailed that they may take the cap off council tax. At the moment, we have no proposal to increase baseline council tax apart from the adult care precept. But today it's been trailed that the budget next week is likely to take the cap off council tax where you have to have a referendum. So that could be a means of taking money out from local authorities and transferring it to local tax. So we have to just see what happens. But as
As
I
far as
say,
you're
I think we're in
concerned,
the
we're in
best
as good
position we
position
could.
as we could be given what's happening around us. Jan?
It's really just following John's point. I think he's absolutely right. We don't talk enough about 14 million that we offer as council tax rebates, and I don't think anyone would really be aware of other boroughs which are doing it. I mean,
Who else is
within
doing
London, yeah, that would be my question. How many other
Who else
boroughs in
has
London offer that?
council tax rebate.
Because for some households, presumably that's about up to £2,500 in the family.
Yeah, I think it varies, it does vary across London. Some charge some council tax because there was some funding given when it was brought in, when council tax support was localised. but what we do costs quite a lot more than was actually the money.
The other boroughs
given them.
giving 100% rebate. Are we the only borough, or are there 2 or 3?
I'm not sure. I think there are others that get 100%, but there are, we can come back on that. But some give 80% rebate and charge 20% council tax. So, and I'd say that was probably the majority position. So, giving 100% is unusual and wasn't funded.
Excellent.
Interesting to know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to be the bearer of doom and gloom as usual on adults, but there's so much uncertainty going forward. We're basing our BCF and IBCF on assumptions. We don't know what's going to happen with the social care reforms, whether they're going to go ahead. We still don't know about the 500 million, what we will get out of that, or how we will get it. Watch this space.
So you're giving us a very wise word of caution that the figures at moment so many uncertainties, we can't nail it down yet. But all we can say is at least we're trying to be as realistic as possible, and at this stage we're balancing, which is something to be applauded, because I don't think we know what chances are.
Yeah, I mean, those are some of the grants that could be taken out of the settlement. But then, so I agree, they are the uncertainties. Haven't provided for the 500 million, and obviously we don't know quite where that is.
We call it the coffee money.
So yeah, so they are some of the uncertainties that are there.
And will that then, I mean, I was reading the reserve strategy, will that really impact on that? Is that all that up in the air as well?
If all the one-off funding, I think 8 million of one-off funding that's in the budget, if that was all taken away, which I think is very unlikely, then that would immediately create a gap. So because we have assumed that will continue, but obviously that will put a lot of other authorities in a much worse position, because they've got maybe a 10-15 million pound gap at the moment. So it would add to that. Whereas in our case, it would be adding to 0, so that would be better. We haven't assumed that they'll give us any growth in the main settlement, so we've assumed no inflation. The control totals for the whole country do assume 3.5%, but I think it's pretty unlikely local government will get that 3.5%. But if we got some of that, then we would get a better settlement. So it's not necessarily going to be worse. I think we've made a realistic assumption of where it will be, but it could be worse. It could also be better, I should say.
Yeah.
Try and have some.
I guess at the moment you don't have a crystal ball.
No.
So we sort of assume the worst, but
we are, we're prepared for where it will be, and then we can take action.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? Thank you very much. So can we please, Mary, anything from LSC or anything?
We haven't discussed it at the LSC, so I can't, I would just.
Yes, it would be your personal comment rather than the.
Exactly. That there's about £1 million worth of proposed savings that are reliant on the NHS.
Yeah.
Would be my comment.
Thank you. Can we agree the recommendations from paragraph 2 then, please?
Agreed.
And then our next paper is the procurement of a customer relationship management CRM system.
Happy to introduce this one to you.
Yeah.
It's a very important paper, and it links to one of the first things we talked about today, which was customer service being at the heart of everything that we do. I think the purpose of procuring a customer relationship management system is to make it easier to, say, get in touch with the council, to make sure that we're more human and responsive. And my aspiration for it is that, accessing council services should be as easy as accessing a service in any other facet of your life. And so the process we should be undertaking is to make our systems as good as what we find everywhere that we go. I think having a single point of contact, which is what this seeks to do as a resident, as a user of our services, will be very useful. And hopefully this is the start of a process that will get us to that point, but there are lots of uncertainties, and I think to an extent we have to be realistic that we're reliant on officers to give us the assurances that the technology here can deliver on our goals.
Josh.
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you, Mike. There's many examples of absolute IT disasters in every form of both public and private enterprise. How are we going to scrutinise and ensure that this stays on budget? Because there's many examples of the IT either not working and then going millions and millions over budget in order to get talking to our system. And secondly, how are we going to monitor how it's going and make sure that this Microsoft system actually does work in the long term? So, Mike, you've been the best person to answer that question.
Well, I think we've got to have effective governance at an officer level of the implementation. We're not going for anything outlandish here. We're going for a standard Microsoft suite of products that what a lot of other local authorities have done. I don't think there have been any well-documented disasters with this, but it really is about having the right governance in place and the right people in place to implement it. The report is about both procuring the IT and about procuring a partner to support us, and that will be a partner that has a track record of implementation in other local authorities. That will be a very key part of the procurement, and so getting the right partner and working effectively with them will make sure that we make the best use of the resources that we spend.
Ellen. So if it says that the contract is likely to exceed 100 million, I can never remember, even though I've been a council far too long, what the amount is which can be done under delegated. But it says in 3.1 that it's going to be the decision will be delegated to executive yourself with the council of Balasites, and I'm just thinking, it says it's going to be more than 1.5 million. I don't know how much that is. Is that 2? Is that 5? Given what Councillor Rendell was saying, that we don't have a great history with technological contracts or a lot of confidence. I just wonder whether this is a decision that might not be delegated, actually. Sorry, that's a very inarticulate thought, but perhaps you can tell me what you think the total value of the contract will be, and whether you think, given our concerns, we should actually make it a wider decision than just a decision.
Yeah, I mean, we're delegating it in line with standard orders. This is the delegation being made here, so if we weren't going through the process that we're going through that leadership now, it wouldn't be delegated. So that indeed is the recommendation. I mean, I think it's a fairly standard process that we do delegate these decisions and set out the process.
But it will come back to this, to leadership team in due course.
No,
But that's what
we're agreeing tonight, because it's above the level. Otherwise, Johnny and Mike have gone off and done it. But because it is above whatever the threshold is, it's come here for us to say, this is what it is. We want to approve a procurement of a customer relationship management system, and we want to use the G Cloud 13 framework agreement. So once we agree that now, we're delegating him to go off and sign everything and to award the contract and
That's the point I'm making, but are we actually happy as a group to say, fine, that's it now, it's over to you guys, spend whatever it is. And hope that
I think Emma makes a very valid point about, are we signing a blank check or are we signing a check which is nearly 1.5 million or 3 million?
I'm just saying, we've had some queries about all of this. I don't think any of us feel super confident.
I don't think that's true. I mean,
okay, good.
Well, no, the point of this meeting is to say, now you've got the paper, which has been rewritten, are you now confident to make that decision? If you're saying you're not, that's absolutely fine. But I'm also going to ask everyone else whether on the basis of the paper and any assurances you wish to get from Mike and actually Maxine, who's our chief executive, on that basis we will either make a decision or not. And it doesn't have to be a unanimous decision, it just has to be the majority of people here who think that's a sensible thing to do. And that's exactly what I could ask you to come in and
Yeah, of course. So Mike's right is that it's just, it's a standard clause to kind of to delegate the award of the contract, and the reason for that is because of the timescales that you get into in a procurement. So if we have to, if we put another leadership report back in the future, then the timing of that can be quite difficult. What I am hearing from the discussion is a need for further reassurance around both the procurement, the implementation and the operation of this CRM system. And I think we need to go away, Mike and I, and find ways to, in consultation with Councillor Valtutis and you, as to how we can do that, because actually that's what this is about. So what we're making tonight is a decision to say yes, press go and have a CRM system, but then the work is going to take several months. And what I would say is, that I think this report gives you the assurance you need to take that decision, would be my recommendation.
Absolutely.
But that you will need further assurance on the implementation.
That's exactly right. It's not the principle of having a CRM, it's just what comes forward.
Because I think the implementation is the process, because I think we'll inevitably make the same decision, even if we add in the extra time to bring back the recommendation of what the outcome of the procurement process is. But it is the implementation once we've made that decision, once we've agreed a price, which will be above 1.5 million, but we don't know the exact price at the moment. Obviously, that's why we've got a process. But I think it is the implementation process, as Maxine says, rather than the actual decision of who our partner is. I mean, the partner will be one of the standard partners that are used in local government. I'm not going to name them because I'm going to give them a pass.
Kim and then Jan.
Okay, so no, thank you very much, Maxine, for that. That gives a great feel of confidence that we're going to have another quick look at it, because I think we've all agreed this is a thing we need to do. So just a point of clarification. So we're talking about a software cost of over 1.5 million, but there's a reference to the capital programme committed of 5.9 million for the customer strategy over a period, and I just wondered if you could expand a little bit about what that meant. That's in 8.1.
Yeah, so that can cover other aspects of the programme as well. We don't expect this to cost that amount of money. We're expecting, they're reluctant to say the actual amount, but it will cost over 1.5 million, and it will cost less than 5 million. But so it won't be all of that money that's there. But I think the key thing is how we use it.
Okay, so between 1.5 and 5 million is what it's going to cost then eventually.
Well, I think you're also saying that the investment in a CRM doesn't represent the totality of our investment in the customer access strategy.
Okay.
And so it's a component part of that whole.
Yeah, a very key component part of it. Because we have got this customer access strategy, which was agreed in 2020. That's all about customer improvement. IT, that isn't about IT, it's about culture, it's about the way people behave, it's about what the culture of the organisation is. It's about much more than IT, but we need this IT to be able to engage well with customers, be able to answer their queries without going into multiple systems, and be able to have a much more slick customer offer. So I think it's central to what we want to achieve on customer improvement, but it isn't the totality of it. The IT is just a part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My question really is that obviously I really applaud the idea of moving to CRM. It's the right thing to do as well. Many businesses have already been doing. But good IT should make the user journey, or in this case resident journey, that much more enjoyable, but it should also bring about efficiencies in our own operations. And obviously we're hoping that this does both, but will we be sort of down the line, will we be tracking the actual inherent IT sort of blockages that we have that we've now lifted by having this system, and then therefore sort of tracking the savings that come about through it as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're targeting savings, I think, of 4% from this, but we will undoubtedly make savings because we will improve the business processes, and this will enable us to improve business processes throughout the council. We'll start with the easier things and then move on to the more difficult things, but wherever that the key processes can be improved, we will, and it will be both about improving the customer journey for the residents, and it will be about delivering savings.
I guess that's that we're more sceptical of, like, that we're sure that it will improve the customer journey if it's, you know, we should see from other people who've already got the system in. But quite often with all these investors say we never get to see the system. So perhaps that's part of the assurance that you can give us over the years. So
Yeah, we'll track that, absolutely track that.
I think we need to.
But just a question, because Johnny said, you know, how great it is. We've got the complaints report at the beginning and we've got this at the end, and so hopefully the CRM is going to help with the complaints. But looking back to the complaint report, talking about housing management already used their existing CRM casework system. So assuming you're not going to be changing any of that, it's purely just for one aspect of customer service, the CRM. I mean, and can we ensure then that all this new system speaks to our existing systems?
I mean, that's central to it, that it speaks to all the systems that we've got. That's what's absolutely key, and housing are already using Microsoft Dynamics, I think, so the integration there should be eased by this. But we've got lots of different systems, and we absolutely need to integrate this with it, because otherwise we're just adding another system to already a jungle of different systems. But absolutely, integration is key.
Catherine.
So that's really my main concern, is the integration of all the systems onto this system, because presumably that's a huge amount of time spent from our offices of actually inputting all that information. So once it's all sort of, and I'm sorry, I'm not terribly good at understanding this, once all that input that's been set up once, will it happen automatically? Or will there be an ongoing cost of more officer time inputting the information into this system?
No, it will collect the information from the other systems, we'll integrate.
So once
the
that's
systems
set up,
together.
it just carries
So
on.
we use the right system for the right job.
Okay.
The information will go in and it will be collated in here, and this will enable the officers, for instance, in the contact centre, on the phone, or people coming in, to only look in one place. At the moment, they have to go and look at, and they have to understand multiple different systems. But we will still use some of the end systems that will be integrated into this.
So for example, like, am I right? So Catherine phones up and says, I've got 3 things I want to do at the council. I want to pay my council tax, I want to change my car parking, and I want a big bin collection to come on Wednesday. The person will be able to look at it and do those 3 things, right? That's the point,
Yes.
rather than having to phone up the big bin person along the way. Then phone somebody else up to figure out about council tax. You know, when you phone up, you say, oh, by the way, can you just check this for me? And that person should be able to do that with this system.
Yes, we're in with the one system. If all those systems are integrated together, and as they are all integrated together, they'll be able to look at one system and respond much more quickly, rather than going off and being either having to refer to another person if they're not responsible for that, or even if they are responsible, having to look in multiple systems themselves.
Yeah.
So it'll make their job easier, and that means they'll be able to provide a better service.
Yeah, and that's very reassuring, fantastic service, customer service. And just one final question, I remember when we went on to Hampshire, there was a terrible mess up when people's bills didn't get paid. I mean, in this sort of...
This is slightly different.
Oh, I mean, that's what I just want, so I know it's more customer service than financing, but I just wanted to make sure there won't be some sort of horrible hiccup in transferring to the new service. Then will they be running at the same time for a certain period of time before they integrate?
The other systems will still operate, so I don't think you get that parallel running the same as you do with that. So I don't think that will happen, no.
But a helpful prelude to a future paper. I
There is. You do parallel with that.
Yes.
But this is a system we haven't got at the moment.
Right,
new. And one thing I should say as well, when I was talking about people phoning, I mean, the other aim, of course, and why this should lead to savings is that we want to put as much as possible online, both for the benefit of people, so they don't have to phone the council, so they don't have to wait in a queue.
That's it.
And-
Help themselves.
And they can just do it themselves, and this will enable that much more than is possible at the moment. And they'll be able to see a single view of the council, not multiple different views.
So you can see, Mike, being of a certain age and generation, I'd say, if you phone up the council, but you will still be,
You will
for,
still be able to.
for those of us or those residents who are elderly, they will be able to, because for some people in our society, they won't manage this, but we are, with our customer access strategy, still going to have a phone line that when you get desperate and you need to speak to someone rather than tap in, there will be someone there.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
12,000 people in the borough are digitally excluded. That's like
Exactly.
8% of our population. So,
Ah.
it's
quite
quite a
nice,
sizable
actually.
number. And we need to make sure that although we have a digital offer, it's supplemented and it's never that this takes
Be all
away
and
from
end all.
that.
And face to face as well will continue, but and obviously many companies have cut off both of those.
Exactly, that's why we're so concerned.
We don't want to do that, but we do want, especially for very simple transactions, that at the moment somebody maybe has to come to the town hall, or they have to phone up. We want them to want to do it online because that's the easiest way for them. And that, ideally, if they can do it at midnight or whenever it suits them, then they do
You're
it.
right.
So it is about them getting the confidence and believing that the online system will give them what they want. It's not by cutting off all the other avenues, it's
Exactly,
by
no chatbots.
persuading them that it's the best.
Last question to Sarah.
Could you just clarify how this will integrate with adults and I presume children, because we have a different system. There's going to be maybe some safeguarding issues or whatever. So how is that going to work if somebody phones up in distress or wants to report something?
Well, I mean, the aim when we get this is, obviously we've got core systems at the moment like council tax and so forth, which we'll start work on first of all. But theoretically you can use it for almost everything the council does, almost all interactions, but we wouldn't be doing that, as a default. We would do that through discussion with the services and looking at what is, what we're allowed to do in terms of data protection, what's safe to do, and so forth. So there are opportunities in terms of integrating with adults and children, but we wouldn't do that. We're not doing that by, we haven't got plans to do that at the moment. That's something that will happen as part of the implementation once we've got the technology. So we will absolutely take account of all the needs for privacy and obviously data protection as well, because that's absolutely key. We don't want to go anywhere wrong on data protection.
So just, it may be helpful. I mean, I will sing the praises of the CRA system we use on housing. And what it does is it's not actually about customer access getting services. It pulls all the information on one screen. So when you're speaking to somebody, it will have issues on there relating to their arrears and a lot of their information. So that's where I would see a great benefit, because certainly in terms of an awareness of where you might have vulnerable people in the building and have that information before an operative goes in, or for the operative to identify these issues that can then populate as far as your database. That's where I see a really great benefit of this system that we've been operating. It's the information that's available to you on the customer.
We have a similar system.
Yeah, I mean, it's really for the transactional and high volume interactions with the public. This obviously there are some of those with adults and children, but it wouldn't replace their line of business systems within the service. It would be what the social workers would look at and things like that.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Are we happy to agree the recommendations in paragraph 2? But also, I think that people want reassurance, so perhaps it's come back as a report of, what's happening over the months would be helpful, just so that we know. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Okay, the last paper is A9, and just to say again, there's a part of it which is information which is exempt, but it's not very long. I assume you've all read it. So, do we need to go into private session, or are you happy that you've read nothing that you exempt from, and you don't need to have any questions in public?
Let's press on.
Press on?
Yeah.
Fine. So, A9.
So may I
Is there much to
invite Anna to come on the basis that she's got the graveyard slot and she's been very listening to us, and Anna, perhaps you could just explain really simply why we are.
I can be Dan, if you like.
Why we are appropriating powers on Silchester to facilitate our new homes that we're going to be building there.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for the introduction. The report does explain why we are building on Silchester 11 social homes as part of the build programme, and we are looking to prevent any delays in delivery of that, while recognising that we want to compensate those people who live adjacent to the site if their rights to life are impacted. So we wanted to appropriate for planning purposes the site, so that, and then in parallel negotiate with residents who are impacted by their rights to light, so that we can then progress on our development without fear of a potential injunction or delay due to legal claims.
It's pretty straightforward. Any questions, Josh?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lila, and thank you, Anna, for coming. Just in terms of like accessibility, understand that appropriate for planning purposes.
Yes.
Basically, what you were saying is we're going to buy a bit of land next to another development in order so people can.
No, we've got our land. It is our land. But this is where I'll probably hand over to the verb. Yes, it is very confusing, and it's also quite sometimes difficult to say. We have the land, we want to use it for housing, but from a planning perspective, we have to. I don't know what another word is.
Because we've got planning permission already on it, so it's like completely confusing.
It's just to in order to allow us to progress on in advance of.
I mean, unfortunately, that's how it's described in the legislation and the Planning Act. So it's appropriation. I suppose it's equivalent or has some similarities to CPOing, also purchasing, not land, but somebody's rights that they may have over the piece of land that you want to develop. So it's a way of converting those rights to compensation. Rather and extinguishing a right to make a claim in court or to apply for an injunction to stop the development proceeding. So as Anna explained, we'll continue negotiating with people whose rights may be affected and hopefully reach some agreement, but knowing that if agreement's not reached, those rights are just converted to compensation rather than the right to stop the development.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I just maybe because I don't think I'm not a stupid person, but I mean, reading this, I didn't quite understand what we were trying to get at, and I didn't. Plain and simple English, it was not used, so it was just a bit perplexing in order to do that. But I understand now. So thank you.
Is there likely to be? Are people going to be very upset about this?
From a planning perspective, we have always considered the impact, and so nobody is going to be completely, kind of having their views and their light completely removed, because we would always, from a planning perspective, when we put a planning application in, have to consider how we impact on our residents, and planning permission would not have been granted if it was completely overlooking and completely blocking. So.
Yeah, just to clarify, the answer is potentially yes, somebody could, because obviously putting a building next door will impact on their light. What we're not saying here is that we will obviously sit down with them, we will come to an agreement in terms of a compensatory figure. And there's some suggestions on that in terms of Part B is concerned. You know, but again, it's a very common thing on developments, particularly in RBKC, where you have buildings going up, overshadowing people.
Good. I've had that explanation. Are you?
Very helpful.
Thank you. Very helpful. Are you therefore happy
Yes,
to?
yeah. Don't let us stop you.
Is there any other business? I've got two things I wanted to say. First of all, I forgot to welcome you. But I think that's because we feel that you've been with us already all the time. It doesn't feel that you're new anymore, but nevertheless, welcome. And secondly, just to say, I think the agenda this evening really sums up an awful lot of what our priorities are. You know, ongoing priority of Grenfell as cost of living, the whole thing about competence, about how we look over after our finances and how we try and make sure that we're not raising taxes too much, that we keep a balanced budget. And then there's the themes again and again of, you know, customer complaints, and CRM, which is all about customer improvement and how we improve our services and improve, therefore, our relationships with our residents. So thank you very much for coming. It's been a very helpful meeting, and now declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.